Welcome back to the channel. Today we are heading to Kentucky. I have to be honest with you. When I started researching this episode, I did not expect it to go where it went. Because Kentucky on the surface, it looks like bourbon, horse racing, and beautiful bluegrass countryside. And it is all of those things. But it is also home to what many paranormal experts call the single most haunted building in the entire world. It has a nightclub, an open nightclub, that the owner had to call an exorcist, and a cave that people died inside. Today we're covering the top 3 most haunted places in Kentucky. I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to look at this state very differently. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the building where death had a tunnel. If you have spent any time in the paranormal world, watched any ghost hunting shows, read any articles about haunted places, you have almost certainly heard of Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. This place has been called the most haunted building in the world. When you hear what happened there, you will completely understand why. Waverly Hills opened in 1926 as a tuberculosis hospital. Tuberculosis, or TB, was absolutely devastating in the early 20th century. TB attacks the lungs, and people died slow and painfully. During that time, there was basically no cure for patients with TB. People just suffered for months, sometimes years, and eventually died. Waverly Hills was built to house these patients away from the general public, which sounds humane on paper. But in practice, it meant thousands of sick and frightened people were separated from their families and sent to this enormous building on a hill in Louisville to wait and see if they got better. Most of them end up dying. At its worst, the hospital was losing patients so fast, sometimes dozens in a single day. There were so many people dying that the staff came up with a solution that honestly tells you everything you need to know about what this place was like. The nurses built a tunnel, not a regular tunnel, but a long underground passage that ran from the hospital all the way down the hill to the railroad tracks below. The nurses did this so that the bodies of the dead could be removed without the surviving patients having to see them. Think about that for a second. There were so many people dying that they built an entire tunnel just to hide the bodies from the people who were still alive. Estimates put the total number of deaths somewhere between 8,000 and 63,000 over the course of its operation. It was staggering, an entire history of mortality condensed into one building. Now let's talk about the specific things that have been reported at Waverly Hills, because this is where it gets really interesting. The most famous ghost is a little girl named Mary. She has been seen running through the hallways, laughing, playing, doing what kids do. Except there are no kids at Waverly Hills. There haven't been for decades. Multiple investigators across multiple separate visits have seen her, heard her, and in some cases captured what appears to be a small figure on camera moving through the corridors. Then there is the entity known as the Creeper. The Creeper is exactly what it sounds like. Witnesses describe a dark figure, human-shaped but moving in a mysterious way. This dark figure has been seen crawling along the walls, moving across the ceiling, going in and out of doorways on all fours. This is one of the most frequently reported and most consistently described phenomena at the entire building. People who have never spoken to each other, who visited at different times, describe the exact same thing about the Creeper. And then there is room 502. Room 502 is the room that even experienced investigators are cautious about. 2 nurses are said to have died in room 502. One by suicide, and the second nurse died under circumstances that were never fully explained. Whether those stories are historically verifiable is unknown. What is known is what people experience in that room. When people visit room 502, They experience an overwhelming sadness and a sudden nausea. A feeling that something in that room does not want you there. Multiple people have had to leave room 502 in the middle of the investigation because they simply could not stay in it. Not because of something they saw, but because of something they felt. A weight of an unknown presence. A pressure that builds until leaving feels less like a choice and more like a necessity. Waverly Hills has been investigated by basically every major paranormal TV show, and the feedback from all of them is the same. This building is unlike anything else they have experienced. One investigator who visited independently in 2021 described setting up a camera at the end of a long corridor on the 4th floor, and in real time, the investigator watched on the monitor a tall, dark figure walk across the corridor in the background. She called her team over. They watched the playback together, and the figure was there for 3 seconds and then gone. The scary part is that the corridor had been confirmed empty before the camera was set up. She said it was the calmest and most terrifying thing she had ever seen because it wasn't frantic. It wasn't sudden. It just walked through the frame like it had somewhere to be. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is open for overnight investigations. People book it months in advance. And almost everyone who goes comes back with a story. If you ever get the chance to go, I will say this. Go during the day first. Get a feel for the building when the light is still with you. Because at night, that building is something else entirely. Bobby Mackey's Music World, the nightclub that needed an exorcism. This one is genuinely unlike anything else on this list, or honestly, on any list I've ever put together, because this is a haunted nightclub. Not an abandoned nightclub, not a former nightclub, an active, open, functioning honky-tonk bar in Wilder, Kentucky that you can walk into on a Friday night, order a drink, listen to live country music, and potentially get attacked by something that has been in that building since before the music started. This is Bobby Mackey's Music World. To understand why Bobby Mackey's is so dark, you have to go back before the neon signs and the dance floor. In the 1850s, the land that Bobby Mackey's sits on was a slaughterhouse. Thousands of animals were killed there, and the blood and remains drained down into a well at the back of the property. Now, in various occult traditions, a place where that much blood has been spilled is considered spiritually significant. And there are historical stories that suggest the well on this property was used for rituals. Dark rituals, the kind that either invite very bad energy into a place or do something considerably worse. The well was eventually sealed off. The well was never removed, and yes, it is still under the building. The property became the site of one of the darkest true crime stories in Kentucky history. This is a real story that you can find court records. A young woman named Pearl Bryan was murdered in 1896. Her head was never found. 2 men were convicted of her murder and executed. One of them, a man named Alonzo Walling, reportedly made a threat from the gallows before he died. He swore that his spirit would return to that location and make the place a living hell. Then there is Johanna. Johanna was the daughter of a man who owned a roadhouse on that property. She fell in love with a performer, a singer, who worked there. When her father found out, he had the man killed. Johanna, devastated and furious, poisoned her father in revenge. And then, pregnant and alone and with nowhere to go, she took her own life in the basement of the building. She is believed to be the primary spirit at Bobby Mackey's, and she is not a peaceful one. So here is where Bobby Mackey's gets truly remarkable, because the paranormal activity here is not limited to investigators. It happens to regular people, staff and customers, people who just came in for a beer and a two-step. Employees at Bobby Mackey's have been reporting strange experiences for decades. voices in empty rooms, the jukebox turning on by itself in the middle of the night, the smell of roses appearing suddenly with no source, which is reportedly associated with Johanna's presence, doors locking and unlocking on their own, and then the physical stuff. Multiple staff members have been pushed, grabbed, and scratched by something they could not see. One bartender who worked there in the 1990s described being alone in the building late at night when something grabbed his arm hard enough to leave bruise marks. He left that night and did not come back. A woman who visited as a regular customer in the 2000s reported feeling suddenly and violently ill the moment she walked through the front door. Not sick the way you get sick from bad food or too much to drink, but immediately, completely, overwhelmingly ill. She felt so sick she had to be helped to her car. The sickness disappeared the moment she left the property, but she felt sick again the next morning. It took 3 days to fully pass. Here is the detail that I think about the most when it comes to Bobby Mackey's. Bobby Mackey himself, the owner, the man whose name is on the sign. A practical, business-minded guy who just wanted to run a successful country music venue. He had a priest come and perform an exorcism on his building. Now, think about what it takes to get to that decision. You do not call a priest for a publicity stunt, or at least Bobby Mackey didn't. You call a priest when what is happening in your building has gone beyond what you can manage with logic or maintenance or staff changes. When the thing that is in your building has made itself impossible to ignore. The exorcism was performed, and the activity continued. Bobby Mackey still owns the venue, is still open. He has spoken in interviews about what he has experienced there, and notably, there are things he has experienced that he declines to fully describe. A man who runs a haunted bar and has made peace with the idea of talking about it publicly, and there are still things he will not say out loud. That detail, more than anything else about Bobby Mackey's, is what stays with me. You can go dance, have a drink, and listen to live country music at the Bobby Mackey's. And if you smell roses when there are no roses anywhere near you, that's your cue to pay your tab and leave. Mammoth Cave, where the darkness has a memory. Our last story today takes us somewhere very different from a hospital or a nightclub. It takes us underground. Mammoth Cave in Park City, Kentucky is the longest known cave system in the entire world. Over 400 mapped miles of tunnels, passages, and chambers running beneath the Kentucky countryside. Now, really picture that. 400 miles of dark, quiet, underground space that has been here for millions of years. Long before any human being ever set foot in it. And long before the suffering that would eventually soak into its walls. Most people who visit Mammoth Cave today experience it as a natural wonder. It's genuinely stunning, one of the great geological miracles of North America. But the human history of Mammoth Cave is considerably darker than the tour brochure suggests. In the early 1800s, Mammoth Cave was mined for saltpeter, a key ingredient in gunpowder. The people doing that mining were enslaved. They worked in the dark, in the cold, in passages that stretched for miles underground, extracting material that would be used in weapons. In the 1840s, a physician named Dr. John Croghan had what seemed like a reasonable idea for the time, to use the cave as a hospital because the air inside Mammoth Cave was cool, stable, and consistent. Maybe it would help TB patients whose lungs were being destroyed by the disease. So he built wooden huts inside the cave and brought patients down to live in them. It did not work. The damp cave air actually made things worse. Within a year, most of his patients had died underground. Their huts eventually rotted away, but they died down there in the dark, far from the surface, far from sunlight, far from anyone who loved them. That is the history living inside those walls. But the most famous ghost of Mammoth Cave And this one is different from most ghost stories because Stephen Bishop was a real, documented, remarkable human being. Stephen Bishop was an enslaved man who became the first great explorer of Mammoth Cave in the 1830s. He was brought to the cave as a young man and spent decades mapping its passages, going further into the darkness than anyone had gone before, discovering chambers and passages that are still visited today. He learned the cave so completely that he could guide tours blindfolded. He made maps from memory that remained the most accurate available for decades. He was one of the most knowledgeable human beings about one specific place who has ever lived. He knew Mammoth Cave better than anyone, better than he knew the world above. Stephen Bishop was eventually freed, but he died just a year later in 1857 before he could build a life in freedom. He was buried near the cave he had spent his life inside. According to guides and visitors who have been encountering him for over a century, he never fully left. The apparition of Stephen Bishop has been reported in Mammoth Cave more consistently and over a longer period than almost any other ghost in America. He is described as a calm, knowledgeable presence, not frightening. Guides have reported seeing him standing in passages ahead of their tour group. Visitors have described a man in period clothing who smiled at them, pointed towards something of interest in the cave, and then was simply not there anymore when they looked back. He is not a threatening presence, but someone who knows this cave and wants to show it to you, which is both wonderful and heartbreaking at the same time. Stephen Bishop is not the only presence that people encounter in Mammoth Cave. The cave is also home to reports of darker phenomena, particularly in the sections that were used during the tuberculosis experiment. Visitors and tour guides who pass through those areas report hearing sounds that do not belong in a cave. Coughing, echoing through stone passages where no one is standing. Whispered voices from side passages that lead nowhere. The feeling in certain chambers of being watched by more than one presence from the darkness beyond the reach of your light. One longtime park guide, a woman who had worked at Mammoth Cave for over 15 years, described an experience she had during an early morning solo walkthrough before the day's tours began. She was in one of the deeper sections of the cave, doing a routine check, when she heard footsteps behind her. Clear, deliberate footsteps on the cave floor. She turned around, but the passage was empty as far as her light reached. She kept walking, and the footsteps kept following. She stopped, and the footsteps also stopped. She turned off her flashlight completely and stood in that total blackness for about 30 seconds. And she heard breathing, and it was not her breathing. It was someone else's slow and calm breathing. She turned her light back on, but the passage was empty. She completed her check and went back to the surface. She never turned her flashlight off alone in that cave again. The Mammoth Cave has 400 miles of passage. That is how long this cave system is. But consider what that means. 400 miles of passages in the dark, soaked in centuries of human suffering, enslaved workers, and explorers who went too deep and never came back. All of it down there in the permanent dark, the permanent cold, the permanent silence. In some of those passages, the lights are on and made them into tourist destinations. But 400 miles is a lot of cave. In the areas where the lights don't reach, nobody really knows what is in the dark. Mammoth Cave is one of the great natural wonders of this country. Go visit it. Take the tour. But when the guide tells you not to wander off the path, listen to them. Because in 400 miles of darkness, the things that have been down there for 2 centuries know those passages better than you do. Some of them were never very happy about being down there in the first place. Three places, one state. Waverly Hills, the hospital where so many people died and built a tunnel to hide the bodies. Bobby Mackey's, a nightclub that required a priest and an exorcism, where the well under the floor has never been sealed off. And Mammoth Cave, 400 miles of underground darkness holding 2 centuries worth of suffering, where a man who devoted his whole life to one place apparently never found a reason to leave it. Kentucky is stunning, genuinely one of the most beautiful states in the country. But it carries its history in a way that you can feel that something happened a long time ago and never fully resolved. Have you been to Waverly Hills? Have you had a drink at Bobby Mackey's and experienced something you can't explain? Have you been on a Mammoth Cave tour and heard something you were not supposed to hear? Tell me in the comments and share your experience. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because next video, we are heading to another state. Until then, take care of yourselves. And if you're ever in a cave and someone turns off all the lights, make sure you know who turned them on in the first place.